Hi, I'm Frank. I'm the co-founder of Staffbase, and I'm the author of The Narrative Age. It's a book about narratives and the way narratives shape our imagined world and how our imagined world shapes our real world. Narratives have real power. As an example, if you buy a Gucci bag, which is just a leather bag that you can make for about $200, you spend more than $2,000 on it. And all of this is down to a narrative. That's the power of narratives. What do have Silicon Valley Bank, SpaceX, Beyond Meat, and the Barbie movie have in common? They all relied very much on narratives, and narratives played a major role in their destiny, be it success or failure. And understanding how this happened and why it happened was a major insight for me in the book. We are experiencing a very polarized state in the world. A lot of people cannot even agree anymore on the facts and even discuss basic facts. Understanding narratives will help people to understand how to bridge these gaps and how to bring people together and make them align on common basic values, I would say master narratives. And this helps to align communication again and unite people. I wasn't passionate about narratives in the beginning. And it was more a topic that came from my co-founder, Martin. He was talking to customers and they were sending out messages and thinking about communication strategy, and they wanted to change the narratives in their companies. And he was saying, that's such an interesting topic. Let's learn more about this. And I was saying, well, I think everything there is to know about narratives, everyone will know that. And once I realized, and I went deeper into research about the topic, what is a narrative landscape? What are master narratives? How do narratives resonate with your audience? And how can you can shape a message? How can you change opinions? And how can you change narratives? That's all very interesting topics that I found out, and that now made it into the book. The biggest aha moment about narratives when writing was pretty much at the end of the book. And it was that if you look at communications today, there's a challenge between connecting your work to real business results. You are doing as a communicator, you're sending out messages and you're trying to create awareness and engagement of messages. And you're struggling to connect all of this to real business results at the end. And business results, for instance, could be the reputation of the company overall, or the reputation of the company for specific things like your sustainability or as a great employer. And this gap is really a challenge today, and it's also a challenge on how to measure the impact of communications. Narratives help to bridge this gap because they clearly show how the messages you send out, how the stories you tell connect to business results. That's what this is all about. I think there might be a couple of opinions, and maybe you shouldn't ask the author about that, but I think that all communicators I know, they deeply care about the impact they create with their work. And narratives is a change of perspectives from the things you send out to what happens at the mind of your audience, to how you really do an impact with your audience. And understanding narratives will help you to truly change hearts and minds of an audience. And that's the impact what this is all about. And I think that's the most valuable piece of the book and the research about narratives is to become a much better communicator. The research involved looking in all sources I could get. So real life cases of successful movements, real life cases of successful companies, their brands, how they've been able to build narratives, but also the research For instance, Robert Shiller, a Nobel laureate, he's written a book about narrative economics, how narratives have driven certain economic trends in the last centuries. And this is all input that builds a picture of the importance of narratives for how people think about the world and how this affects the real world and their decisions and their actions. Story and narrative are two things that are not the same. And I think for many people that's a big surprise, because in many cases it's sort of treated as the same. Stories are individual pieces, and these pieces create a puzzle, and the puzzle is the narrative. Some also say narrative is something like a blueprint or a system of stories. So a lot of individual stories will create a narrative. And the narrative is created in the mind of an audience. To give you one example, if you start a new job at a new company and people will ask you, how's the company like? You will collect a lot of stories, like how your first day was, having lunch with one of your colleagues, going out with the team, meeting your boss, and so on. All these individual stories will create a narrative in your mind, and that's something you will tell to others. And you might say, hey, it's a pretty cool experience. There's a lot to learn, but I feel I have a lot of energy for this new job. That's the narrative that was created by the stories. Narrative is the basis for the reputation of the company. And if you think about reputation, for many years, a lot of leaders thought reputation is unmanageable. It's just there. And there was no real attempt to manage it, because you say, how can I manage something that happens in the minds of other people? Understanding narratives means you can build these individual pieces that influence the reputation of a company. I see a connection between stories and reputation through narratives. Stories build narratives, and narratives build the reputation of a company. And one of the core ideas of the book is, you can think about the reputation of a company, but as a communicator, if you think about a strategy, you should build like a narrative strategy and say, what are the key narratives that I care about, that I want to build in the mind of my audience? As an example, if your reputation is dipping, and the question is like, how can you deal with that? I think there are two ways, and it's around changing narratives. You could have a counter narrative, or you could have an alternative narrative. If your reputation is dipping because of a serious issue, let's say you're a food manufacturer and your food is unhealthy or even poisonous for customers, you cannot go anywhere else. You have to address the issue, right? If you are a bank and there's a potential bank run, you have to address the issue. Like if people are concerned and it's an immediate crisis, there's no way around this. You have to fix the issue and address it. That's something you would do then with a counter narrative. If, for instance, a trend is changing and consumer behavior is changing and you see that maybe you lose market share or other things, then it's a possibility to think about, how can I reposition my company, my product, and then alternative narratives can play a role. This means I look at the narrative map of my audience and say, what do they care about, and how can I connect to this map in a much better way? One great example about alternative narratives is Stanley and their tumblers, right? Stanley used to produce steelware specifically for men and specifically for working men, like blue-collar jobs, which are heavy duty, but which are, I think, would even always be green, right? And at some point, they've seen through research that also a lot of other groups were using them because they were so practical. And they found a lot of women were using them as well. And they decided, let's change the narrative of our brand and make this a lifestyle brand and have more colors and make this cooler. And they've done some amazing things also on TikTok, right? And with that, they were able to kind of change from a heavy-duty steelwear, men-only brand to a lifestyle brand, which I think even my daughters today know about it and are like saying, oh, my teacher has one of these Stanleys now and she's so cool now, and so on. So that's a great example for how you can change a narrative. And in this way, it's more like an alternative narrative where you tap into other areas of the narrative map of your audience. Businesses which rely on trust specifically rely on narratives and building their narratives strategically and understanding also the narrative landscape of their audience in a particular good way, because trust is built over time. Like it's like you put things in a bank account over and over again, and you build trust. Unfortunately, it's way easier to destroy trust than to build it, right? There's the saying, you can destroy years of trust building in a couple of minutes. That's unfortunately true, but nevertheless, all businesses today need to build trust, need to build a reputation, and narratives are the basic for doing that. A North Star narrative is one of the most important narratives an organization can have. It's pretty much about the future, not just the organization, but the future that this organization wants to help build. It's a destination you want to go to. And as we all know, we all thrive. We all have the energy to go somewhere if you have a destination where we can go to. And that's what a North Star narrative is all about. There are many great organizations out there with fantastic North Star narratives. The one that I find most inspiring right now, and it's also one that I did a detailed case study in the book about, is SpaceX and the North Star narrative of making humanity multiplanetary. Obviously, it's easier if you go to space to build a great North Star narrative, but this is a great example of a far-reaching big vision and also having a pretty concrete idea, like what would it look like to achieve this vision? And this combination makes it a great North Star narrative. The company's vision is a part of the North Star narrative. One idea of the book is to kind of get rid of the idea of the vision and mission and maybe the purpose as a concept, and people need to understand all these individual pieces. A North Star narrative can be one story, one narrative that involves where you want to go, what's the future you want to build, that's the vision part, and the part that the company wants to contribute itself to achieving that, that's the mission part. And what I'm suggesting in the book is, with a North Star narrative, you take the vision and mission and bring this together in a one easy to remember story. I would definitely say yes, and I would say the most important narrative is responsible for that. It's the North Star narrative. It's the question, what does this company want to achieve in the future? What's the future, the hopefully better future this company helps building towards? If you can answer this question, that's a major part of the employee experience, and that's a major contribution you can have. A narrative moat is a term that wasn't there before. That's a term I came up with because I was looking for something that shows the huge importance of narratives for an organization. And the moat is, if you think about it, is a protection it would be a protection of a medieval city. And today in a business world, a moat is something like a competitive advantage that's lasting. And that's something that drives a company. And we all know great companies like Apple, like Nvidia now, and others who've built a great moat and a competitive advantage. Narratives are a big part of a competitive advantage because narratives help to build reputation, help to build brand value, and that's why the moat is very important to build. A key component for understanding the power of narratives is how they resonate with an audience. And you can imagine that each of us has a lot of narratives that we already know. We learned them through our childhood, we learned them through our interaction at work, through our hobbies, through public media, whatever is out there. And what I'm trying to do in the book is to map this and give this a sort of guidance. What sort of narratives do people have? And I differentiate 4 different narratives, which is master narratives, which are the most deeply embedded narratives in our minds. We have emerging narratives, things that come up, you see in the media or publicly discussed right now. Then we have local narratives, things you might know from your job, from your family, from your local town. And we have a local identity. These are things that are deeply embedded into our consciousness, and they can be very personal or very localized to a group. And all these different narratives create a narrative map. The better you know the narrative map, the better you can build narratives that resonate with this narrative map. First, master narratives are deeply embedded narratives, which are often deeply embedded into our culture. And one famous example is, for instance, the underdog narrative, right? Somebody might be poor, disadvantaged, maybe have other challenges through hard work, maybe through luck, through perseverance, goes out and wins the trophy, wins the prize, and succeeds finally, right? And for instance, this master narrative is a great narrative that a lot of startups are using, right? They are the new kids on the block. They have an innovation. They don't have all the money. They don't have the connection. Nobody knows them. And as a startup, it's a fantastic place to be, to say, we're the underdogs. We are here to disrupt this space. And we are going to do that. That creates a lot of energy for the team, also for investors and everyone else, because we all deeply inside, we are rooting for the underdog. And that's a real power if you understand that. I think for some companies and some organizations or movements, that's pretty easy. Like one example I have in the book is the diamond industry. De Beers has created as a company a narrative many years ago, specifically in the US. If you're getting engaged, you should give your fiancé an engagement ring. And they even created a narrative that you should take 2 months' salaries to actually do that. And this has actually created a whole industry for diamonds, which continues to grow and which is now a huge, as I would call it, narrative moat around the industry. And this narrative, of course, has a return on investment. And it just shows you what's possible. If you look at every single luxury industry and luxury company like Gucci, Hermes and others, they all have built brand narratives, which are hugely important. But also all other narratives, like for employer branding, for your sustainability, they help to build reputation. And there's a lot of data out there that great reputation helps you with potential employees. So you get more applications, you are a very attractive employer. It helps you with your customers. They are willing to pay more for your products. And it helps you with the public. And for instance, in case of a crisis, you get the benefit of a doubt. People will trust you, what you say, and not mistrust you. Every one of us is a communicator because you're communicating with your parents, your partner, your colleagues. And whatever you're saying is something that needs to resonate with what they already know and their values. Of course, we are used to talking to these people, and so we know pretty well the mindset, but every intercultural issue you have, every issue or conflict you have, most of this comes down to narratives and how others understand or do not understand your narratives. We would say we live in a very polarized world, and understanding differences between other groups, like having a theory of mind, what does this person think and why does this person think this? It's so important for being a better communicator, but also for being a better leader. I think for the future, narratives will continue to play a huge role, and I would even say it will further increase. Our attention span is reduced. A lot of the complex topics that are out there are too complex for many people to understand, so we need narratives to simplify them and put them into packages that the audience can understand. And we have a lot of noise out there, a lot of information going on. So if you want to cut through with your message, you need to focus not just on your story, but on the narrative you want to build over time. And that's why narratives will continue to be very important and even rise in importance. I think number one is to understand the basic difference between narratives and stories, and specifically, why are narratives much more powerful than stories? And also, why are narratives more powerful than stories? And also understand how to create a narrative map for your audience to understand this in more detail. The second thing is, if you have this knowledge, there are great things you can do with that. You can understand how to change an existing narrative. You can understand how you can build a North Star narrative for an organization, and you can understand how you build important narratives that build and shape the reputation of an organization. I call this a narrative moat. And finally, you can learn about how to bring a narrative to life through the strategy, the theory of change that you're rolling out, but also the tools and processes that should be in place to really make this a success. I think I'm in the space for 20 years, and I can say about myself, I entirely underestimated the topic of narrative. I thought it's something similar as stories, and now after a deep dive into the topic and research of over 1 year, I'm fascinated what's behind that topic, and I really think that this is hugely valuable for communications, specifically to be more powerful and impactful. Because after all, what you want to do, you don't tell stories for the sake of stories. You want to change somebody's mind, and you want to change hearts and minds. And if you understand narratives, that's what you're going to do. Narratives are a powerful tool for leaders to understand how to change the mind of an audience. This helps them to change existing status quo. This helps them to get through with transformation projects. This helps them to set a company in a new direction, to build a future where employees are willing to follow them. That's why it's so helpful for leaders. The book will be launched end of April 2024, and it can be purchased on Amazon.